So we have here a nice Creature speaker set from JBL, which has a really nice sound. Unfortunately, the satellite speakers tend to break and where they make very little sound. If you look closely, and amps are torn, and this thing is moving around. That's caused by what happens inside, which I'll show you in a second. JBL stopped making these in 2004. They're not selling the speaker parts. They're not selling the satellite speakers anymore. You have to toss it out because it doesn't work. So one of your options is to use this nice woofer with another set of speakers. The woofer has a built-in amplifier. You could use one of the other things that's out there is these Mac Pro speakers, which are designed for the G4 and a couple other computers that have a built-in audio amplifier. Most computers don't. They just have a headphone output port and they can't amplify. So to use this, and it also has this very bizarre looking plug or sound. These speakers sound great, but if you don't have a G4 anymore, then these are kind of paperweights. But they still sound great. They're also made by JBL, same thing. So this speaker set has a plain regular speaker and then a fancy speaker with a volume buttons. This is just a capacitive, I think, capacitive sensor. It doesn't press or anything. It's just by touching it you send a signal. But JBL, in its wisdom, used a 3-pin connector to go in. So typically, to power the speaker, you need a positive and negative for the speaker, and you also need something to tell this guy to make the volume go down and to make the volume go up. But there's only 3 wires. Part of the circuitry looks like a high-pass filter because this is a tweeter. It's to keep the high frequencies going to this. But the rest of it probably does this fancy volume control stuff and translates the signal so this guy knows how to go up and down. These guys don't have any buttons. So to make, if you want to keep the volume control, what you have to do is disconnect the speaker cables from here and connect up that, which is what I did in these. Going on why these things break, and you can't complain about the engineering of this. It seemed like a good idea when they designed it, but if you look here, this little magnet is firmly attached to the base of this, to the back end of this, and when you move it, if you look, they glued the snot out of it. But for some reason, as you use these over time, this little magnet will kind of creep its way forward. And there's a really nice video. A gentleman already explained how to explain all this, and I'll try to put a link. But if you catch it early enough before it tears the diaphragm all to pieces, you can take this apart, put some glue back in there, and just get probably a flathead screwdriver of some kind, and maybe work this thing back down into place, and then your speakers will work great and you don't have to go through all this mess. But after a point, it gets too late. This thing comes all the way out and rips the diaphragm, and I have not found that they work after that. Sometimes with the little tears they're still okay, but when they're ripped bad like that, they stop working. So we just cut these wires and attach this. This is the basic speaker without the up-down volume control. And you can see if you look that the diaphragm's all torn to snot. This speaker doesn't work. You can hear something coming out of it, but barely. Not useful anymore. You can't buy the parts, so you either throw this in a landfill or try to save it. The easy way, or the nice way, would be if we could just connect this directly to this and plug it into here. One of the issues you run into is that this is a 4 ohm speaker. If you measure this with your voltmeter, your handy dandy voltmeter here, you'll find you measure this, it's just under 4 ohms. It makes it a 4 ohm speaker. And this is an 8 ohm speaker, so it's not a drop-in replacement. If it was the other way around, if this was an 8 ohm and this was a 4 ohm, I probably wouldn't do it that way, because the higher impedance speakers, the 8 ohm speaker, will use less power, draw less power from the amplifier. and it probably just won't get as loud. The frequency response is probably a little different. Don't really know, but it might burn out the amplifier if this was higher than that, but it's not. This is lower than that, so I'm replacing a lower 4 ohm with a higher 8 ohm, and all I'm probably going to lose is it might not get as loud. And there's probably some other losses, but I've tried this. It sounds absolutely great. So inside this is just a capacitor and a resistor, and it looks like it's configured as a high pass filter, again, to keep the low frequencies in the woofer and the higher frequencies up here. So I just clipped the speaker wires, pulled them off, and replaced, cut the speaker wire from the Mac Pro speakers, and I ran it underneath the circuit board and tightened the screw back down, and that's to give it some strain relief. So if you pull on this, you're pulling on the connection to this circuit board and not pulling on the solder joint. So I soldered these together and used shrink wrap in there to keep it insulated. So basically what's coming out of this talks to this. He thinks he's talking to this guy, but he's not. He's talking to that. I kept the case now, so now I have all this stuff on my desk, which is kind of a pain in the butt. And again, this is probably not the most cost-effective best way to do it, but it keeps this stuff out of a landfill. If this didn't have this high-pass filter, I probably wouldn't have used this. I would have just connected it directly, but it's expecting a high-pass filter, so might as well. Plus, you get the cool little LED light when it goes on, and you can have this as what you see and this in the back if you like somewhere. But now I have this kind of clunky thing. Turns out that this fits nicely through that screw hole, so I just ran it through here rather than drilling another hole. But when you do that, these bosses here, this boss won't fit in there anymore, and you can't close it all the way, so I had to cut it back. I just took a wire cutters and cut that back a little bit, so now it's a little shorter than these, and now it fits just perfectly. And by the way, this works great, sounds great.